Welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined by Dr. Rajpal Brar, who's with 3CB Performance, and he goes by Dr. Raj. Dr. Raj, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, man. So how's work and everything been going for you? Just to maybe kind of fill people in. So obviously you have your own medical practice, but you also write extensively about sports as well, right? And
Yes. So you were saying, I write extensively about sports, a lot of it being sports injuries. That's related, whether it's to professionals or a lot of it is running focused as well. And so I just try to give digestible and relatable information for individuals who might be kind of wondering what's going on with certain injuries, because the reality is we don't really get much information. So as a layperson, it's hard to decipher it, right? So I just try to break down some of the medical jargon and some of the kind of the common things that you hear from sports teams and try to break it down into more kind of pertinent timelines. And then the biggest thing for me is I try to set expectations for people, because there's always, for example, like if someone gets hurt, like a hamstring injury, there's a high chance of risk of re-injury. So it's trying to give that information out.
Okay. Well, I guess that was one question that I have is, from a layperson's perspective, let's say, a fan of basketball or, even
Yeah.
baseball, let's say, people, they hear these athletes are injured all the time. They hear, oh, Josh Hart is injured and,
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Davis has this injury. And I think from a layperson's perspective, they think, how are these people getting injured all the time? I think it's understandably so that maybe a layperson could look at a football player and say, "Oh, I get why that guy's injured. That it's a full contact sport." But yeah, maybe if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about how, let's say, especially like basketball players, like maybe why do they get injured so often, or are a lot of their diagnoses that are put up by the media are those more for PR purposes and really they just want to rest the player? Maybe if you wouldn't mind, maybe talking about that for a minute or so.
Yeah, sure. I mean, firstly, I would say in general, sports are not the biggest reason, most common reason for injury. It's too much activity without enough rest. And if anything defines that, it's the NBA regular season. You have 82 games over a very pretty relatively limited time, and it's high activity. So even though a lot of these players don't have overt injuries, like whether it's like an ankle sprain, although basketball does have a lot of those, like those acute injuries, immediate injuries. A lot of these injuries do build up over time, like you had mentioned, Josh Hart's knee tendonitis. That's something that built up over the course of the season, and he even admitted to it. He said, "I should have rested over the summer and done treatment and all these things. Rather, he just kept playing." And so that's why you hear a lot of players saying, you come later on in the season or the playoffs, everyone's playing with some sort of pain or knack or injury, right? Because these things build up over time compared to the acute injuries that kind of happen due to a certain whatever, you land on someone's ankle. Those are, to me, actually more rare than the injuries that are built up throughout the course of the season.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, you must remember when LeBron James got injured on Christmas and he was out for that. I
Yeah.
think it was 17 or 18 games, whatever it was. But, it seems like there were some people, you look on maybe Twitter, even some like media personalities, and they made it almost sound like LeBron James was just taking his time and that he really wasn't, that injured or something like
Yes.
that. But I mean, are you like, let's say in the case of LeBron James, was him missing a few of those games? Was it more preventative method or was it just for preventative measure? Sorry. And it was just to make sure he doesn't get re-injured.
That's part of it. Well, firstly, I would warn against listening to Twitter or media personalities when it comes to any injuries in the first place, because there's always some narrative, right? You hear a lot of this stuff. Like Windhorst recently said LeBron's 280 pounds. It's just not true. He didn't gain 20 pounds in a month. No, that's hard for anyone to do, let alone that someone like LeBron who's so committed to what he does. For the groin injury, yeah, part of it was the fact that groin injuries have a high reoccurrence rate. You have to make sure that the individual is able to come back and that groin is relatively healthy. He's still not 100%. I'm actually making a video on it right now that shows, yeah, he's still missing a few indicators that he's not back to 100% yet. And so, there's always that risk reward when it comes to an injury, especially a muscular injury like a groin, an adductor, or a hamstring, or a quad. Is that, do you rush that person back and hope they're okay, or do you take your time and get out in front of it? A recent example is like Devin Booker. He came back quickly from a hamstring injury. Oh, guess what happened? He re-injured it quickly, and then he was out for even longer, right? And so, in LeBron's case, and Rich Paul even said it, he said we want to make sure that when he gets back, he's able to stay back on the court and not get re-injured.
Well, in that case, let's say for Devin Booker, for example, you said that he was the one that kind of took the initiative to come back earlier. I mean, in that case, will it be like the Suns medical staff? Will they basically be telling him, hey, this is your decision. You can come back if you want, but maybe, we recommend you sitting out for another 2 weeks or whatever. I mean, in that situation, does the athlete himself have the ability to supersede what the medical staff is recommending? Or how does that breakdown happen?
I think it depends. It depends on the relationship between the staff and the head coach. Like I don't know the Suns one well enough because I haven't really followed their dynamic, but the Lakers one I do follow very, very closely because I'm a big Lakers fan. Like I know, for example, like Luke, he just listens to whatever the medical staff tells him, and he will not play the player until he gets clearance. I don't know how that works across all the teams, the medical staff, how much true independence that they have. So again, I think that just depends. It also depends on the relationship between the player and the medical staff. Does the player really trust that staff, right? To have his best kind of, to really trust them to understand what exactly is going on and then be able to follow them exactly. There's always comes a point though where there's some gray area where you believe that person could get back, and then do you err on the side of being conservative, or are you just holding this person out for a longer time when they could be back, right? That's the gray area of medicine that a lot of fans don't quite understand.
So, I mean, we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but is football the definitive most dangerous sport for athletes, or is that kind of a little inflated, that notion?
When you include head injuries, by far.
Okay.
Yeah, by far.
How about when it's not, like, let's say for all of the injuries besides sports injuries? I mean, sorry, not head injuries. I mean, when it comes to, a torn Achilles or broke. Okay.
Honestly, for the most part, it is still football in general. Now, like the highest prevalence of torn ACLs is female soccer, but then females have certain risk factors that underlie that. But in general, football, it does involves all the same running and high burst activity, but then you factor in the high level of impact that comes with it, and naturally it makes sense.
Okay. So you mentioned the Lakers, and their medical staff and what you know about them. Would you say, I mean, compared to other, I guess, teams in the NBA, I mean, do the Lakers have a good medical staff or an average one or a bad one? Or I guess another question is in the NBA today, I mean, are medical staffs really that much better and worse than other ones? Or are they all pretty equal because of, I mean, it's 2019 and it just seems like they would all hire the best doctors and physicians they could find. I mean, I guess, yeah. Would you say, are the Lakers better or worse than the average? And are there any teams that are really bad?
Again, it's really hard to say because I don't know enough about all the staffs to say who's better, who's worse. All I can speak, I just don't have enough information. Of course, I think the teams are trying to hire the best. But at the same time, there's always variance amongst medical events, any profession, right? Whether it's medical providers or not. As for the Lakers staff, people hold it against them that they hold players out longer. I think they do a great job because they're really, really methodical with how they bring players back from injury. So, I mean, like Marco Nunez has a very, very methodical approach that he uses. and he uses it consistently, no matter who it is. Even in LeBron's case, they used a very consistent, methodical approach where LeBron had to go through certain progressions, and he had to have a certain response within a certain range before he was allowed to move on to that next step. And so that's what I look for. I look for consistency and approach, and I look for rationale and approach. And I see that with the Lakers ever since Marco Nunez took over as their head athletic trainer.
And maybe just for the layperson, how many, I guess, members exist for the Lakers medical staff, like physicians and doctors wise? I mean, is it a big staff? Are we talking like 5 or 10 people, or is it a couple dozen? I mean, how big is the staff roughly?
I believe, I'm not exactly sure, but I know, for example, I think like their athletic training and physical therapy staff isn't that large, and they have strength and conditioning, which is what's head by Gunnar Peterson. I don't know the exact numbers, but I believe like their physicians and stuff, they're all contracted out to the team. They don't have like the physician already works at a certain hospital, and then they're also contracted with the Lakers as well.
Well, okay.
But then again, you have specialists that the players can go see outside of that normal contract, right? For the team and also for the physician to be associated with them. The team can kind of go to whoever they want, right? That for them, cost is of no consequence. So they can go see whoever they like. That's why you see a lot of players and teams getting those other kind of that's what I'm looking for. Getting those other consults with other MDs or specialists.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this is a question that, I mean, I've sometimes thought about this as well, is that when, let's just stay on the NBA, I guess. When an NBA player, when they get injured off the court and it's completely unrelated to anything basketball, if they get injured or have to go to the hospital or go to a doctor, does their team pay the bill for that? And does the team provide the doctor? So for example, I'm sure you heard about this, John Wall, oh my gosh, I forgot what injury he got, but I think allegedly he was at his house, and I think he broke his foot.
He tore the Achilles.
Okay. So for that, in that situation, because it was completely unrelated to basketball, I mean, does he go, or would he go to the Wizards medical staff or their recommendations, and do they, let's say, foot the bill, or does he find his own doctors and physicians?
I believe in this case, so John Wall, I don't think is a good example, because he was recovering from a Haglund's deformity, which is related to the Achilles. And, he slept at his house while recovering. It wasn't like I didn't other like Monte Ellis, who was on a motor scooter and fell off during the summer. And so, in John Wall's case, yeah, it's all Wizards by the Wizards, I believe, because it was during recovery from a different injury, and it wasn't like him playing some other sport or something like that. So now, if it's someone like that Monte Ellis injury during the summertime, that I'm not sure of. I know the players have a lot of latitude, more latitude in the summertime. I'm not sure how it works when it comes to the health aspect. I imagine that it's still, if the person's injured and not breaking something contractually by playing some other sport, which some players have that in their contract, you can't do X, Y, or Z during the summertime because it's too much of a risk. I imagine that it would still be handled through the team.
Okay,
but I honestly, I don't know for sure.
So you're fairly confident. Like, let's say again, if it's Josh Hart this summer, he's moving a couch for whatever, his brother, girlfriend, or something like that, and he pulls something in his back. Most likely, he'll probably see some doctor associated with the Lakers, or at least a referral from the Lakers.
Yeah, because it's in their best interest to get him the best care.
Well, that's a very fair point.
Right. So
I guess one thing I was thinking of is, what would you actually say makes a good medical staff? I mean, let's say, it's your, Rob Pelinka or whoever is the person that actually would oversee what the medical staff is doing. I mean, what makes a good staff? I mean, what is it? I guess what would be, let's say if you were a person that was heading the Lakers medical staff, I mean, what would you look for in other not musicians, physicians and, doctors in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest I'm looking for is what I mentioned before is how they approach, what's their rationale for approaching things, and why they approach things in a certain way. So, I'm looking for, of course, you want an individual who has a certain skill base when it comes to treating players or being able to handle players. But the biggest thing I'm looking for, okay, how does this person approach being a provider? Do they have a rationale for what they're doing? And then it's okay, how can I fit together a team that coalesces well together in order to provide that best level of care? Because you do need a lot of communication between all the different levels of medical staff and provider. And I think that's key when it comes to these high level athletes, being able to transition them from rehab to a bridge back into activity and then going back into the performance aspects, right? So you want providers who understand that entire spectrum, and they're willing to collaborate and communicate with other providers in providing that full range of care.
Hmm. So there are certain teams, I guess the perception is that they have more injuries than other ones. So a perfect example, I think, in the NBA are the 76ers, right? I mean, I don't even know what you call the curse, but it's the curse of if you're drafted by the Sixers, you won't play the first year because you're injured. And I mean, this has happened to several of their players. And that situation, if you see that there's a team that has, I guess, an inordinate amount of injuries to their players, do you assign blame to anyone in particular for that? Or is it just, is it kind of, sometimes it's just a crapshoot, and who gets injured and who doesn't get injured. And there's really there's no one really to blame for the fact that Joel Embiid was injured for his first year. Not Bill Simmons, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz.
Right.
Would you look at that and say, okay, somebody's at fault for this, or is it just more bad luck, I guess?
Depends on the type of injury. If it's like in the case of Embiid, Simmons, Fultz is a whole different case, which is there's a lot of gray area there. But in cases of Simmons and Embiid, even Zaire Smith, they can't do anything to control those. Those were acute injuries that happened. Like Zaire Smith had what did he have? Some severe food allergy. What can the medical staff do about that in terms of catching that? It might I don't know what exactly background they had on that. With Embiid, it was his Jones fracture, which tends to happen over time, which is difficult to catch for anyone. Like even look at Bol, an organ has that. Excuse me, not it was a navicular fracture, excuse me. And then Simmons had the Jones fracture, which he broke the outside of his foot. But from my understanding, it happened to him when he rolled his foot on a player's foot during practice. So the medical staff in those cases, you can't control those. It's really hard to control those types of events. So I have to look at now, if I see a team that has a bunch of non-contact injuries that could be preventable, then maybe you say, okay, what exactly are they doing to reduce the risk of those types of injuries? But when it comes to those contact injuries, there's really nothing you can do about those.
I saw on your YouTube channel that you did a video about Markelle Fultz. Not to necessarily go over all the information about it, but I mean, what the heck happened in that situation? I mean, here's a player that number 1 pick in the draft, and he's in Philadelphia for a year and a half. I mean, I don't even know how many games he played. What, 24 or 15 or something like that?
Yeah, end of last year.
I mean, what happened in that situation, and was his injury to blame partly for his departure?
I think firstly, yeah, I think absolutely it came to a point where I think something like that definitely wears on an organization. It wears on a player, and sometimes you just need a change of context, especially for a team that's clearly looking to win right now. So, when they drafted him, they were in a different phase than what they are right now. And they ramped that up quickly. So I don't think they have right now. They really feel like have not the patience, but they're just not in that mindset anymore. Rather, you just want to move on and allow both sides to go their different ways. And I think that's the right choice. As far as, Markel's injury or what happened, it's really difficult to say because there's so many different, we don't really have much information on what happened. I can theorize on it. From my understanding, he did have, I can just go based off what the medical staffs have said. I'm not the type to go on conspiracy theories. And so you have to just go off the information that you have in front of you. And I for me, putting two and two together, I believe he did have some shoulder impingement. And then over time, when you have the same pain over and over, the way that we would call pain science works is that your brain begins to anticipate that pain, whether that structure is injured or not. Pain is an output of perception. So if you perceive an area of your body to be threatened, it's going to be painful. So for Markel, if over time his brain starts to anticipate a pain response, that's going to change how he's trying to get his jumper off, right? Because whenever you have pain, you're going to try to avoid it. In his case, he still wants to shoot, so he's trying to now change his shot, which he did. And so, but over time, it becomes reinforced. And then that all to me really solidified what I saw him doing at the free throw line. He was doing like that juggling back and forth. And that's a pretty common thing that not common, I don't want to say common, but when you see players who kind of have what we call that condition where they're having difficulty going through a certain position because they have that like anticipated pain response, what you want to do is change the context of the movement, because a lot of times the brain will associate, in his case, that arm coming up at the shoulder level as painful. So what he did on that free throw, he essentially changed the whole context of the movement. He focused on that juggling movement, and then he got his arm above the shoulder, and it was actually a good lifting shot too. So a lot of this stuff, it's tough to work through when it comes to the mental side of it. But in the end, that's truly how pain does work. It's not just a tissue. It's how your brain perceives a certain area.
So do you think that Markel Fultz, do you think that through work and working with physicians and other medical staff members of the Magic, do you think that he could get back to where he was? Like, I mean, with all the promise and the ability to play, I mean, do you think that he can recover as a player?
Depends on how they handle it. That's the question. I mean, depends on how they handle it. A lot of times, I mean, just having, like him and his agent got that diagnosis of Thrash-Gallop syndrome. Maybe if that kind of, for him, gives him a concrete reason for what he's going through, that's going to help him to get through it. And so the thing with these injuries, and I wrote an article on him his rookie year, I said, it takes time. It's not easy to get through something like that. There's a word for task-specific focal dystonia, where they found for certain tasks, you actually have changes like in your muscle activation. You have changes in how your brain perceives that area. So it's not something easy to get through, and it's not going to be like an overnight. So it's difficult. It's quite difficult.
Okay. I want to change gears a little quick to another person drafted in the same class as Fultz, and that's Lonzo Ball. Do you think that Lonzo Ball is actually injury prone? Because I've seen this online, people write these articles and you'll see tweets that people say, oh, Lonzo Ball is injury prone, and because of that, he's a little less reliable than another player. Is he actually that injury prone so far?
Well, he never had many injuries before he got to the NBA. So it's hard to say whether he's, or it's just been a bad recent spell. And with the ankle stuff, higher risk in the short and medium term of re-spraining it. Okay, that's just the reality. So that's difficult to say. With the knee, I hate to put that term injury prone on anyone, especially for someone who's not even 2 years through their career and who's never had those injuries before. So I think it's way too early to say something like that. And based on his full career so far, it's impossible to say. Like the ankle injuries to me are not surprising because they're clustered. Like, would people say Steph Curry is injury prone? I would say no. His ankles, he had those issues. He dealt with it with his knees. he got run into, and that's going to hurt anyone's MCL the way that he got hit. So again, it depends on the specific injury type, how it happens, and why it happens.
You know, I'm not a medical doctor by any regards, or even a back specialist or anything like that. But I feel like when I see Lonzo Ball play, and I mean, I love him as a player, I feel like he doesn't stand right. I mean, am I totally wrong? Or because I feel like when I see him move, he doesn't move like any other player on the court sometimes. Am I crazy, or have you also noticed this?
I mean, he has a unique movement style. That doesn't mean anything about. That doesn't really mean much about injury risk or anything like that. And he also has a lot of. I mean, he has a lot of unique characteristics. He sees the game. He anticipates and sees the game really quickly. So that might change his movement pattern because he's able to, and recognize something quicker. So he's already, moving a certain way. He certainly has his own movement pattern, but. Movement isn't a monolith. There's variance to it.
Okay. Yeah, because I love Lonzo as a player. I mean, I'm a huge Lakers fan as well, and yeah, just sometimes I've kind of noticed like the way he stands someone. I'm like, oh, this everything about him's a little quirky. Seems like, but I mean, I think he's a great player, and I know we're not talking about trades, but I'm glad that the Lakers didn't trade Kuzma, Ball, and Ingram for Davis. I mean. I think it would have been. I think we were overpaying for Davis, to be honest with you. So I'm glad to see Lonzo stay.
Oh yeah, I mean, I said to me, the one guy I would keep out of everyone is Lonzo, because he's the one guy who fits with he complement. He's the ultimate complement player. I mean, look at the defense since he got hurt. It went from with top 3 efficiency with him in the league to now last in the league since his injury. So he's the ultimate complement. He doesn't care about having the ball at all. He doesn't care about stats at all. And he truly doesn't. He just doesn't care. And so you want those low usage rate, high IQ, really good defensive players. That's who are the ultimate complement to these star players, right? Like he has no ego to him. And I think that's part of the reason why people get on him. And that's part of the reason he isn't as aggressive. He has such a unselfless attitude, and it's really hard for him sometimes to try to take over games, and really attack how people will say, oh, why, how come he's not taking the game over? Because his mentality is so pass first. It's so, I'm fine with not being that go-to guy. But although he was showing a lot of signs of that before he got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, there are a lot of people in the NBA that can score quite a few points. I mean, even a person like J.R. Smith, I mean, if you get him on a hot night, I mean, he can score 25 points. So I feel like everyone rags on Lonzo, like, well, he only averages whatever, 9.2 points, whatever he averages right now for the season. And it's like, well, there's a lot of players out there that can score points. There's not a lot of players that will actually defend, as you mentioned. I mean, you watched the Lakers versus Hawks game that happened a week ago, and I mean, it was an embarrassment, right? It's like this Hawks team again. I can only name 2 players on the whole team, and everyone's kind of whatever about it. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like with Lonzo, I mean, obviously a lot of people dislike him because of his dad and because of his dad's proclamation. And one way that they attack him is to say, oh, well, now he's injury prone, so let's move on from him because he's injury prone. And I don't know. I figured since I'm talking to a doctor that also follows the Lakers, I would ask him about it.
But when it comes to the Lakers, man, there's just so much. There's too much bias in there to listen to a lot of what people say, especially about Lonzo. Like everything's filtered through this lens because of his dad, but because he's not your typical NBA player prototype, right? So people hang. What do most people look at when they see a player? Points per game, and that's their only metric that they care about. Right. When I look at a player, I'm looking at what is this individual's, what unique talent and skill set does this guy bring to the team? And when it comes to Lonzo, for his age, there's I can't think of a player for a long time who brings his level of defensive effort, his level of pace, and then the mindset of he just doesn't care. I mean, you would think if anyone would lash out at the media or something or at fans, it'd be him, right? For how much crap he gets. He never does. And then I remember there was an interview with Julius Randle, and they're like, is Lonzo really like this calm? He's like, yeah, he doesn't listen to what anyone else says except the team, and that's it. And that's actually how he is.
Yeah, if you listen to the media today, LeBron James, like you mentioned, he's a fat, he's fat, and he's basically done with his career, and every other Laker's a bum. I mean, even Brian Windhorst, like you said. I mean, when he said the 280 thing, like you said, I mean, LeBron James, a professional athlete gained 20 pounds in a month. I mean, during the season, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Dude, I always tell people, know your sources. Ever since Windhorst, has a podcast, he became a talking head. He's just been very, very prone to like clickbait. Yeah. And that's what he gets paid for, ESPN. And so people just say stuff and people take it at face value. Oh, it's Windhorst. When Windhorst was a beat reporter, he was reliable because he actually had, his source was LeBron and his people. It's kind of like Dave McMenamin now for ESPN, who gets direct quotes from LeBron and Rich Paul. I mean, he's relatively plugged in. But Windhorst now is kind of just, it's changed where he's become very clickbaity, and that's no fault nowadays.
I mean, I remember texting that to a friend, and it was just laughable. I mean, yeah, is LeBron James, is he a bigger guy because of his muscle mass? Of course. I mean, he looks considerably larger than Brandon Ingram, but yeah, I mean, 280 though. I mean, in a month, like you said, where would that have? Where did it go?
No, it's ridiculous. The funniest part, there's pictures of LeBron before he came back practicing with his shirt off, and no one said anything, right? He looked very similar to what he did before. But then Windhorst goes, again, it's just one of those things where media members they know that people don't quite understand it. They won't think about it. They'll just read that, oh, hey, LeBron's overweight, and that's it. And that's all they'll focus on, and they won't think about it critically.
I just want to ask you one more quick question. So, I mean, since we're talking about athletes' weight, I'll hear guys, again, let's say you bring up Brandon Ingram, for example. I think he's listed as 6'9", 6'9" or 6'10", something like that. And I think he's also listed as 190 pounds, something like that. I mean, for a person his height, is he underweight a little bit? And it seems like sometimes you'll hear about some of these basketball players that are, 6'7" and they weigh 200. And I think, wow, there are guys that I know that are 6 foot tall and they weigh 200 pounds and they don't look overweight by any means.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is just, when it comes to weight, some of it is your body type. Look at KD. He's skinny. He's skinny. He's been in the league for a while. He does strength training a lot. It's hard for some of these guys to bulk up like that. And so, but KD, he's still not a weak player. He knows. I wrote an article on this before the season for Silver Screen and Roll about how weight isn't a direct correlate with strength, especially when you're just starting to really do weight training and strength training. You can get a lot of strength and not gain weight. Even this year with Ingram, when you watch him drive the lane, he can unroot players off their spot relatively better than he did last year. He hasn't gained that much. But a lot of strength is about understanding, leverage and when do I use it, and far more than just being a brute on the court.
Well, that makes sense. Wow. All right. Well, Dr. Raj, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And there's a lot of information here. And, sometimes even for myself, someone gets injured in the Lakers or there's 3 injuries back to back. And my initial thought is, the medical staff is crap. Fire everybody, fire Walton, throw everybody out except for Rob Pelinka and then LeBron James. But I mean, I think after talking to you today, I feel like, there's a little bit more ease where, these people are all professionals, at least on the medical side. They know what they're doing. They don't want any player to get injured. And yeah, definitely. I very much appreciate your time. Real quickly, how can people follow your work online, and where can they see the information that you publish and everything like that?
Sure. So the website is 3CB, be like betaperformance.com. But then the main stuff, they can follow me on YouTube. And then I also write for basketball predominantly on Silver Screen and Roll, which is a Major Lakers blog.
Okay. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much. We'll put links to those sources in the description of this video. And yeah, thank you again for coming on, and we look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Sweet. Thanks, man.
All right. Take care.
Yep, you too. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Yep, you too. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Yep, you too.